I do believe that for reasons that aren't obvious, that the West has got some things right. We've got the sovereignty of the individual right. That's the most fundamental thing we've got right. We've articulated that, I think, in a remarkable way, not only theologically, philosophically, in our body of laws, in our societies. And one of the consequences of that, as it's had its effect on the rest of the world, is that everyone is getting richer quite fast. And that's a really good thing. Okay, having said that, it's like, am I proud of that? It's like, I didn't do that. What the hell? Pride. What's that? That's not the right response. How about responsibility for that? How would that be?
I'd like to take a moment today to speak on the subject of pride and one of my greatest disappointments in Jordan Peterson. I should start by making clear that I am not a clinical psychologist, but while I do not hold a PhD, my views are supported in literature, and what I have some knowledge of is business management. And one of the fundamentals to business management is creating cultures of responsibility, something I'm sure Peterson would relate to. If you're looking to get the most out of your employees, it isn't enough to make them feel satisfied with their working conditions or workplace benefits. Contentment alone won't do it. You've got to make sure that they also accept responsibility for the work they do, both good and bad. The most effective way of achieving this is through creating a culture of pride within the organization, by showing every employee how their work impacts the success of the company and rewarding those employees, teams, and departments that reach or exceed their goals. It's incredibly important to give credit where it's due when things go well, but also important for employees to accept responsibility for the bad outcomes too. An employee who is proud of his work is much more likely to accept his faults when presented with failure, whereas an employee who takes no pride in his work is a lot more likely to externalize blame, while also lacking incentive to do more than the bare minimum. We might say that such a person is lacking in conscientiousness. It's interesting to note that employees who are less diligent in their work will end up lower on their company's internal competence hierarchy. But indeed, there is also a larger competence hierarchy where at the bottom you will find businesses that have failed to create cultures of pride and responsibility within their organizations. To take pride in one's work can therefore not only be seen as fundamental to success at an individual level, but also fundamental to the success of capitalism itself. I could go on at great length how various companies employ different strategies to instill pride in their employees, work uniforms, for example. But let's end it here with a business management lecture. What does this relationship between pride and responsibility look like from the perspective of an individual, and how does it impact broader culture? Let's say I'm expecting a child and decide to build a crib for it instead of buying one. 10 years later, when that crib has long since fallen into disuse and disrepair, my attitude towards it is then going to be dominated by the amount of pride I took in building it. If I took no pride in it because my craftsmanship was terrible, I might throw it on a bonfire. If I took a little more pride in it, I might sell it since I see it has value. And if I took a lot of pride in my work, I might give it a new coat of paint and make a point of holding on to it, so that hopefully, one day, my grandchildren may make use of it. Implicit in pride is responsibility. When you are proud of something, you also, by default, accept responsibility for it. The inverse of pride, shame or embarrassment, mirrors this relationship and is integral to the function of discipline. Attempting to punish someone who feels no shame in their actions will have much less of an effect than punishment doled out to someone who accepts shame. Punishment will also be a lot less effective in correcting behavior if its source is a person or institution the offending party does not respect. A son who is proud of his father is far more likely to feel responsibility to listen and acknowledge his father's words when he's being told off. On the other hand, a boy who feels nothing but shame for his alcoholic deadbeat of a father is far more likely to only develop resentment when knocked upside the head for his ill deeds. Implicit in shame is a responsibility not to act in such a way that you feel shame in the future, to avoid behavior that brings back the same feelings of anguish. It is because of this relationship between shame and responsibility that it is of such great importance that people do feel shame when their actions are destructive to themselves, society, or both. For people who score high on neuroticism, however, their fear of shame, which is to say their fear of failure or perhaps rejection sensitivity, might make them overly cautious and lead to them missing out on opportunities that would otherwise benefit them. But that's a different topic people have already covered elsewhere. Feeling embarrassed on behalf of someone else might seem a little nonsensical on the face of it. But feeling ashamed or cringing when someone else does something stupid or behaves awkwardly is really beneficial, both to ourselves and to those we live with. The feelings of shame we experience when an arrogant fool visits a forest known for the high rate of suicides that occur there, while dressed as a clown, informs us of a responsibility to avoid similar behavior. This is simply learning from other people's mistakes so we don't have to repeat them. Shame is an incredibly powerful motivator and often the first step to personal growth and transformation. Indeed, it also played an important role in deciding the 2016 presidential election. It wasn't the Russians, it was shame, memed effectively. But what about feelings of pride on behalf of someone else? Isn't it really stupid to feel proud of something someone else has done? If we are to follow the logic of individualism to its extreme, then yes. It's an entirely nonsensical sentiment to affirm. Recall what was said earlier, though. Implicit in pride is responsibility. Aside from the fact that a win for a football team raises the testosterone levels of its devoted supporters, thereby showing a direct causal link between feelings of pride on behalf of someone else and positive health effects at an individual level, the logic still holds true. If the accomplishments of someone else set a good example, then there is great practical value in honoring them and their legacy and feeling pride in what they achieved. This applies to the small scale just as well as the large. If students are instilled with a sense of pride in the school or university they attend, then they will consciously or subconsciously seek to uphold its traditions, to maintain its culture. A people that is proud of its heritage, whether it affirms it explicitly or implicitly, will seek to protect and uphold its culture. So let's cut to the bone of this issue then. Does it make sense for you as an individual to be proud of your ethnic heritage? The simple answer to that question is yes, absolutely. It has practical value. And if you are white, you have unquestionably more to find pride in when looking at your ethnic background than any other people on this earth. An affirmation of pride in your white identity is also, in and of itself, an affirmation of responsibility to uphold the culture of your people, including the fundamental principles of Western civilization, chief among them the sovereignty of the individual. Jordan Peterson has made it his calling to persuade people of the benefits associated with the shouldering of responsibility. His cause is just, and for many seeking meaning in their lives, Peterson's message of self-actualization and fulfillment through the willing acceptance of great burdens has turned him into a valued guide. Most of what Peterson says might be termed basic common sense, and to argue, for example, that standing up straight and tidying your room isn't sound advice is an impossibility. It is to a great extent that Jordan Peterson's popularity is a result of speaking common truths backed by a deep and unassailable understanding are the facts of human neurobiology and psychometric research. Peterson also focuses to a great extent on the virtues and success of Western civilization. In particular, it is the sovereignty of the individual which he holds sacrosanct. So why is it then that Peterson says you shouldn't feel pride in your heritage, when such an affirmation carries with it a great many responsibilities? Responsibilities towards the very things which are to Peterson of greatest importance. I can only speculate, but what I think I'd prefer is for Peterson himself to consider this blind spot of his and provide, perhaps, an answer of his own.